Hello, and Sunriver U welcomes you today to the presentation on the Sunriver Owners Association Capital Transfer Fee. Today we have Bill Burke, the SROA President of our board, Clark Peterson, the SROA Treasurer, and James Lewis, the SROA General Manager. They're going to begin by giving about a 30-minute presentation that hopefully will answer most of your questions regarding the capital transfer fee. If you have questions, please submit them by typing them in the chat and make sure that they are questions. We get a lot of opinion.
Short ones.
Yes, the shorter the better, brief and to the point. Also, we've had questions submitted ahead of time, and we will be addressing those questions first. So just listen in and your questions will come up eventually. Thank you. So over to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm James Lewis, General Manager for SROA, and I'm going to kick this off real quick and see if we can do a share screen of our presentation. Okay, just a couple of statistics for everybody watching, and many of you may be familiar with this, but many of you may not. Sunriver is 58 years old. That's when it was originally developed. And it consists of 3,300 acres of land. There are 4,174 home sites, units. That's single-family homes, condominium units. And of those residences, there are 900 permanent resident homes, 1,700 rental properties, and 1,500 family vacation homes, second homes that people come to periodically throughout the year. It's home to the Sunriver Resort, home to the Village at Sunriver. That's the commercial and retail and restaurant village. Home to the Sunriver Service District, police, fire, and emergency services. And then adding to the dynamic in Sunriver years, there are about 200,000 visitors that come to Sunriver every year. And being the last week of June, we are right in the middle of the kickoff of all those visitors. And the reason why these statistics are important is having that grasp of from when Sunriver first started development to today, where you see these statistics. It's an ever-evolving community. And so as we talk more why the capital transfer fee is important and look at continued changes in Sunriver, these statistics will change, and the capital transfer fee is important to keep Sunriver relevant.
Next. So what is a capital transfer fee? It's a fee paid to SROA for any Sunriver home, condo, lot, or commercial property sold in Sunriver. This proposal is to add an amendment to our consolidated plan, which is the master governing document of Sunriver. And the capital transfer fee will be set at 1/2% of the property sale price. That is being written into the consolidated plan. It cannot be increased above 0.5% by the board, by any small group of owners. It would take another vote of all owners to increase it above 0.5%. And actually the language says up to 0.5%. So as an example, if a home sold for $1 million, 0.5% is a $5,000 fee. And we'll look a little bit later at average sale prices over the last couple of years. It would be paid at closing as part of the closing documents. It's a way for new owners to invest in the community for all the amenities that we have all paid for over the years of ownership through our maintenance dues. It's a 0.5% that will go dedicated to new amenities. And we would ask buyers to pay for it. But knowing that it is a real estate transaction, we all know that in contracts and negotiations, everything is up for negotiations. So who actually ends up paying in the end could be either side or both sides sharing it. There are exceptions. it will not apply to non-monetary transfers. For example, if you're transferring your home or condominium between spouses or to your children or to a living trust, family trust, this would not apply. You're not exchanging cash, you're just changing the title. It would not apply in the case if there was a foreclosure on your property or some similar legal proceedings. And there is a little caveat in there that in the future, the administrator, who is the Sunriver Board of Directors, could identify certain other types of transfers by rule, that by explaining the rule that it would not apply to. We might also mention that this is legal. That's a question that has come up. The state law does say that cities and municipal bodies, government bodies, cannot issue a transfer fee. But we are not a city. We are a homeowner association, and they are allowed in Oregon to have a capital transfer fee. In fact, across the country, many homeowner associations have this. It's common, particularly in large scale communities similar to ourselves. Next slide.
Okay, in addition to the statistics I started out with, you think about, okay, Sunriver has developed out over those past 58 years. And you think about, what is SROA responsible for? 1,500 acres of common land. There's 66 miles of paved roads, 34 miles of pathways. There's 2 pool complexes, the Shark Complex and the Members Pools. The fitness center and event rental spaces, Benham Hall, both of those are at Shark. There are 6 separate parks of varying sizes, Fort Rock being the largest, in the amphitheater that's also over at Shark. There are 17 tennis courts, 18 pickleball courts. We have our boat launch facility. We also have our administrative office and our public works maintenance yard, maintenance facilities, and we have 2 RV storage yards. And again, as we talk about capital transfer fee here on this presentation, you think about all those things that I just talked about that SROA is responsible for. Those are the things that make Sunriver attractive. Those are a lot of the things that drew you here to, as an owner, made you purchase property here, makes you want to spend time here. So as we talk about this a little bit further, there are questions that we get, comments from owners all the time, that how do we add amenities to the community? So this list, potentially, there's a desire from owners that it gets longer.
And as you look at this list, it's important to remember that you as a homeowner own this. As a group, we all own this. So a part of your value in your property, it's not just the value of your house and the land that it occupies, it's a fraction of all of our pools, roads, pathways, complexes, and recreational facilities. So the value of your home is enhanced by the amenities we have both now and in the future. So let's look a little bit at the SROA budget. Our operating budget is around 15 million. You see the total there for this last year, $14,960,000. 59.3% of that is your yearly maintenance dues, paid for by each owner, including the resort and including all the condominiums that the resort owns. Each resort condominium pays the exact same annual maintenance fee as you pay. So 8.87 million is from our maintenance dues. We could gain another significant amount of money, $5,740,000, from the sale of RPP passes for rental properties having access to our facilities, MPP passes, advertisements in the scene, and other kinds of fees, with a significant amount of that coming from RPP passes, which are visitors are basically funding, although it's the owners of properties that are rented that pay that, either the owners or their representatives, the companies that they hire to manage their property. And then miscellaneous income, $350,000. So that's where our money comes from currently. And our use of funds, the vast majority, almost 73%, is used for operations. So not only the money you pay in maintenance dues, but also some of those other sources of income are used for just the operating costs of running Sunriver in all of our facilities. There's about 3.64 million for capital replacements items in a typical year. And then we do budget a small amount of money for new capital acquisitions. And this last year was a little over $400,000. Some years it's been even as $600,000 or $700,000. So there's a small amount of money built into our maintenance fees to cover new amenities, but not significant numbers to cover the growing costs of adding big ticket items. And that was the whole purpose in looking at a capital transfer fee.
Okay, so let's talk about how these the revenue is utilized for the benefit of the whole community. If we look at the maintenance fees, RPP, MPP, service fees, CNADs, all of that sort of stuff, what that goes to is covering the cost of our operations. That means staff, that means contract or consultant services. It can be material and supplies, and it can be the utilities. Additionally, we have the reserve fund that I'll get into history a little bit later in our presentation, but the reserve fund covers the cost of replacing existing assets. That's our roads and pathways, common maintenance areas, common areas maintenance, vehicles that could include plows, trucks, office equipment, building equipment, computer and network infrastructure. The point is that we run a very lean budget, always have, balanced budget, and the issue of having a lot of money for new amenities becomes the issue. Well, we don't spend what we don't have. At the same time, we also have received a great deal of owner input regarding wants and needs for new amenities. Excellent. So, trip down memory road. 25 years ago, Sunriver wasn't doing so well. We were in bad shape. We had insufficient funds to maintain our existing infrastructure. Roads and pathways were in disrepair. Pools were aging, as some of you may recall. Common areas were not well maintained, and we had to defer a lot of maintenance. But over time, Sunriver owners have stepped up. In 2006, the owners voted a 24% maintenance fee increase. Following that, in 2009, the owners voted for a 52% maintenance fee to increase an increase to fund our reserves. Our asset reserve fund addresses situations like deferred maintenance that I mentioned previously, upgrading our pathways as well as our roads, creating the boat launch that so many people use for access to the river, creating a new owner's pool in the area where the old dated member pool existed, adding pathway tunnels on average one a year, and upgrades to parks. So another example of owners stepping up. In 2010, owners approved a special assessment for shark. So from that, we have the aquatics facility, we have a fitness center, we have community rooms, and we have the outdoor amphitheater. You'll notice in parentheses there an amount of around $4,258. That was an assessment that went to each property, whether it was an empty lot, an existing house, or any other buildings and facilities. There were 4 ways of paying that off. One way was through a lump sum payment of that $4,258 or thereabouts. Some people chose that. A second way to do it would be to have 5 annual payments, which is what our household did. Those annual payments were around $928. Coming along with that, though, was also a 4.5% interest charge. 2 other options were available for homeowners. One would be 15 annual payments of $379. With that came the 4.5% interest rate as well. And finally, you could pay it off over 180 months, which has some people paying it off this year at a far reduced rate of only $32. But my point being that when a house was sold, under the first option, when a lump sum payment was made, if I sold the house thereafter, I paid for the amenity that the new owner gets. And the same thing would happen with the last three options. If somebody was paying on a 5-year plan, they sold in year 2, there was an outstanding payment to be made that needed to be negotiated at the close of sale. Okay. Next slide. Okay. You've heard the terms competition and relevance come up a couple of times in the conversation already, or the presentation already. At one point, 1968, we were the only game in town. Blackview Ranch was built in that era of 70 to 85. And 85 to 95, we saw the development of Crosswater, Broken Top, Eagle Crest, more competition in the region. And between 2000 and 2015, we've seen many additional developments that are our competitors. Brasada, Caldera. Think of Caldera, if it was developed or platted in 2000 to 2015, you've seen how it's filled in the last few years. And they're a direct competitor to the value of our homes here. Lake Creek Lodge, Pronghorn, Tethero, all of those add something different and something that we like to think makes Sunriver unique and better than all of those.
Okay. The questions came up, by the way, as I talked earlier about RPP and MPP being a major source of revenue. What do they stand for? RPP is Recreational Plus Program. So that's a program that anyone that rents their house buys passes that gives access to Shark, the tennis courts, the pickleball courts, the boat ramp for their visitors. So you get 2 passes for each bedroom, and you pay a fee to SROA in the area of $2,400 to $4,000 or $5,000, depending on how many bedrooms you have. Significant source of revenue. And then for members, MPP, those are the little ID cards that the owners of the property can buy that give you access to Mary McCollum Park, the tennis courts, pickleball, Shark, that you pay, $90 a party. The first card for your property gives you 20 passes to Shark. That's what MPP stands for. So as you look at amenities, the question as we look at the competition with the other resorts in Central Oregon, the question is, will we have the amenities in the future to draw both visitors and future owners? Because actually, if you talk to owners today, if you talk to your neighbors, how did they first encounter Sunriver? What was their first experience? You'll find a vast majority of them said, we came here for visitors for many, many years, and then we eventually bought a house. So having visitors here increases our source of sales for the future. So what might be some of the amenities that owners have been requesting? And these have come from a variety of sources. These are things that are already being requested through some of the surveys that SROA has conducted, through owners coming before the board and requesting things, the parks amenities master plan, the strategic 2030 plan that was developed this last year. Owners got together and worked on each of those documents, and they all talked about amenities they would like to see in the future. So that's where these ideas have come from. And these are possible amenities that could be funded with a capital transfer fee. The amendment to the consolidated plan says this is a dedicated fund for new amenities, equipment, and infrastructure that will provide a direct benefit to current or future owners. It cannot be used for salaries or benefits. It cannot be used for maintenance and upkeep. It will only be used to fund new amenities. And here are some of the larger ones that have been suggested, and some of the rough estimates of costs. Our biggest amenity when we look at owner surveys that people say what's most important in being in Sunriver is our pathways. Well, there's 2 areas in Sunriver that have been proposed for expansion. One is, you may notice there is no pathway between Circle 2 and Circle 3. As a result, individual pedestrians and bicycles are legally allowed to be on the road, because if you don't have a pathway adjoining the road, you can be on the road. And that's a big liability, as well as a nuisance for drivers. So it's a safety issue that we would need to remedy at some point in time. That's about a $2 million cost. And it's something that they've been looking at for 20 years. Also, if you live in the south part of Sunriver, in the Meadows area, they have no pathways or very, very few pathways. So that area too, to add pathways, to give them the same pathways that the rest of us enjoy, is about $1 million expense. So pathway expansion could cost $3 million. And it's been proposed other kinds of small changes to our pathway system. And maybe even someday adding some second pathway lines that are dedicated to just bikes and get them off some portions of Sunriver. Additional parks. Fort Rock Park has been in need of improvement for some time, and we've examined ways to do that. Stage 1 estimate is $800,000. And then there was a stage 2 and a stage 3 at lower amounts to bring Fort Rock Park up to a competitive park system. Regional and pocket parks, developing the Cottonwood Park where the current 2 tennis courts are in the dog run. Putting in a pavilion, putting in restrooms, maybe a sports court, maybe some playground equipment for kids. It'd be another place that you could rent for a family gathering without just renting the limited options at Fort Rock Park. Also Meadows, the southern part of Sunriver here. There's been talk about developing their park system with the same kind of thing, restroom, pavilion, playground equipment. Those kinds of developments could be talking in the $2 to $4 million area for the all 3 areas. Indoor courts facility has been a request that's been coming up more frequently to the board. And we don't even have an estimate for that. We haven't looked at that, but you're again going to be talking about $1-2 million or more. How about additional club and meeting rooms at Shark to enhance the community socializing? People have requested expanding the fitness center. Both of those two have been in the $1 million range. Another possibility has been talked about is the realignment of Theater Drive and making it a straighter road. And if you did that, you might develop some more landmass that could be used for a small park. So these are just some of the possible projects. That's not to say any one of them are going to be covered by the capital transfer fee, but these are some ideas that have been put forward. If you look at, these are some AI pictures. If you ask AI to generate, what a covered tennis or pickleball court might look like, or a park setting, that. Now, how exactly the capital transfer fees might be used is there is a plan that we would, upon passage of this measure in August, that in the fall, we would establish a capital planning task force for input that would review options, that would look at having, a survey of owners of what's important to you. Every 3 years we do a major survey of owners, and that is scheduled for early, sometime in 2027. First quarter. So that would be an excellent opportunity where we'd put forward options that owners would have a chance to vote on and provide input to. And we do those kinds of voter surveys every 3 years on a formal basis. Okay. So what were the alternatives to having a capital transfer fee? So 0.5% of the sales price of each home sold. It's looked at as being a more equitable way to raise money versus maintenance fees or special assessments, in that larger homes that have a larger value and tend to have more occupants, particularly if they're rental homes, and have a higher demand on the amenities in Sunriver, would pay a higher fee. A 2-bedroom condo is not going to sell for the same amount of money as a 5 to 8 bedroom home. So they would pay a lower fee. It is used by other major HOAs. We looked at a number of them when we were developing this, the finance committee and the subcommittee of the finance committee. And also just this last week, we began our reserve study that we do every 3 years, where we bring in a reserve specialist that works with HOAs around the country to develop their reserve studies and check it. And he indicated too that many of the HOAs that he deals with have a capital transfer fee. And it does require a vote of owners of everyone that votes. Each property is allowed one vote. 60% of the owners need to vote yes to institute this change. So one of the alternatives would be to, let's just go increase the maintenance fees. A number of people, owners have talked about that and suggested that. Why don't you just increase the maintenance fees? Several reasons why we chose the capital transfer fee over that is, number one, we'd be talking about a 10% increase in your maintenance fees. And that would be for every year in the future. And also you'd see compounding on that. And so it would add up over time and could add up to even potentially even more than a capital transfer fee. That too requires a vote of the owners. And we would say normally we've been increasing our maintenance fees by 3.5% to 4%. This last year to 4.5%. So this would be a 10% increase above that. So if the capital transfer fee fails and we switch to an owner maintenance fee, we'd be asking for maybe a 14% increase in your dues. And that too would require 60% of all the owners voting yes. And we might mention here too, that if we did that in the coming year, the resort would not pay that increase and the village would not pay that increase. Both of them have an agreement with us that the resort until 2029, we cannot increase their maintenance fees above 4%. And the village has a 4.5% cap. So if we went that route, it would be even less fair to our owners. And it's very similar if we did a special assessment on a per project or a pooled basis. We would put together some projects and have some costs, but again, it would be paid a flat amount per property. An empty lot, a 2-bedroom condo would pay the same thing as a 5 to 8 bedroom home. And to me, if I were an owner of a 2-bedroom condo, and we have 1,000 of them in Sunriver, you may not realize that. Why should they pay an equal amount for developing the amenities when an owner of a 3, 4, 5, 8 bedroom home, when you sell it, you're going to have a much higher market value because of those amenities that were paid for, 25% by 2-bedroom condos. What is fair about that? And of course, we have an option of doing nothing, but we run the risk of not being competitive in the future. How much money might we generate? This is the number of home sales the last 3 years. And if we looked at 2022, there were 183. 2021, kind of post into COVID, there was 278. But based on the last couple of years, something in the 130, 140 homes is probably a minimum of what would be transacted in a typical year. This shows the average prices in the 870 to 915. And so the fee of 0.5% would be $4,400, $4,500, and it would raise $600,000 to $800,000 a year.
Okay. I think the position of originally the finance committee as well as the board goes to the issue of we need to keep Sunriver relevant. We can see that in all of our building blocks, whether it's strategic plan 2030. The other examples include the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the Pathway Safety Master Plan, a variety of building blocks that are available on our website. One thing that's sometimes not thought of is how do we keep Sunriver's financial health viable? With 200,000 visitors a year right now, we don't want to lose those visitors. Although I know some people would love to lose some of the business. But we need them. How do we keep our restaurants open, our grocery stores open? How do we become really a hub for a large portion of South Deschutes County? So we're good, but we realize we need to continue to invest to remain competitive. As we remain competitive, as amenities are built, there are amenities that you own. So it adds value to your property. You can see a box below, or on your screen rather, that talks about a comparison of Sunriver homes with Deschutes County homes. The final thing that I would have to say is that the capital transfer fee is an opportunity to look forward rather than becoming complacent. And an opportunity to invest in maintaining Sunriver as in its role as the leading resort in the region. It will help keep Sunriver relevant in a very quickly developing competitive market while increasing the value of your home. It will also allow you to keep having your family come here generation after generation. Other comments? And you'll notice all of this information, financials, everything, facts,
Frequently asked questions.
yes, frequently asked questions are listed there. It's all open. It's all very transparent. We really encourage people to, if you can, do a little homework on that and make a well-informed decision.
So there's the web address at the bottom of the slide. It's also, if you look under owners things on the web page, it'll take you to the spot that also might answer a lot of your questions.
Okay, are you ready for some live questions?
Sure, we are.
All right. Before we address the live questions, I would like to remind the listeners that we're taking questions only, and the comments are to be saved for your conversations with friends and neighbors. So, thank you all for the presentation and all the information. Given Oregon's restrictions on transfer-related fees and the principle that HOA expenses are typically borne by current owners, how does the board justify both the legality and fairness of imposing a capital funding mechanism on sellers who will not benefit from future improvements, particularly when those improvements may disproportionately benefit ongoing commercial interests such as rental operators and resort-related activity?
Oh, there are a lot of aspects of that question.
There are. Well, we hit you with the big one to
Part of
start.
it, well, I can lead off. Part of it is we have done an extensive legal research. It is legal, as Clark mentioned earlier, by Oregon statute, as well as federal statute.
Homeowner associations.
Yeah.
Homeowner associations are able to utilize this mechanism. And it sometimes surprises me that people don't necessarily realize we're not a city. Cities are not allowed to develop this and utilize this sort of a fee.
Okay.
The other pieces of that?
Yes, the other piece of this question is about addressing improvements that might disproportionately benefit ongoing commercial interests such as rental operators and resort-related activity. Disproportionately, that they would get more out of it than the homeowners.
Well, in case, not all of our owners were aware, maybe that 40% of our homes are rental homes. A chunk of them for investment and rental only, and the rest of them, the owner might use it on an occasional basis, but has it available for rent the rest of the year. But these are amenities we'll be looking at offering that would enhance all of those properties. And for our existing owners are the ones that are requesting the indoor facilities. They too are using the bike pass and the walking pass. And we've had requests for years from the people in the Meadows area about adding pathways in their neighborhood so they're not walking on the road and at risk of being hit by a car. So this is not just for recreational visitors, it's for all of us. And when it comes time to sell your house, the amenities are what adds to your value to get you a higher price.
I think, Clark, to your point is, it's the word benefit. We say disproportionately benefit. I think you look at benefit. Benefit is in multiple ways. What you're talking about is if you have new amenities that are here and you have permanent residents, they're available for the permanent residents to use every day. They're here, they can use those. So it benefits them in that way. If you're a rental property owner, it may benefit you in as much as it supports your business interest on your rental property. So I think you really have to look at the term benefit and how it's used. It's broader than just one point.
Okay. Second question. Will the board disclose any input, coordination, or formal or informal support from the resort, real estate brokers, rental management companies in developing or advocating for the capital transfer fee proposal? So it sounds like people are concerned about decisions being made with influence from business side as opposed to homeowner side.
I don't know that there's any influence. What various members of the staff, owners, members of the board, finance committee have done is they've given presentations to all of those groups, spoken to the property managers, the rental property managers, spoken to realtors, and heard all of their concerns, answered questions. And so there, in that vein, there were very broad questions similar to what we're getting today. There were a lot of people, they didn't have their mind made up. They were there to gather the information. And so from our perspective, our goal was just to, as Bill said at the end, is to get the information out there to all the owners. We were trying to make it available. There's resources for you, this forum itself. So I don't know, I guess I don't really understand the reference to influence. It's really, we're talking to all the entities and trying to give them this information that you got today.
And as we've probably all been aware, the resort hasn't taken a public stance on how they stand on this issue. Otherwise, they'd be taking out an advertisement on it. And other than that, just like they are an owner within Sunriver, just like the rest of us. And as a result, we don't inquire how they're going to vote, and we don't publicize, what their thoughts are. That's their responsibility. Just like each of us get to have our own choices and votes. And the realtors have been very receptive. They know that in the end, if we don't stay competitive, our market values are going to decrease, and the number of buyers that we have that are interested in buying into Sunriver is what helps prices. And so if you don't have the amenities for the future, then our prices will go down relative to other resorts in the Central Oregon.
Okay, so again, as these questions come in, they are kind of varied. There's no particular sequence to asking them. The 0.5% is a very large tax. Did the committee consider a smaller amount? Will it take longer to create the funds you desire? But it would also be much less troubling for some owners to have a smaller amount.
The committee did look at that when we looked at the other large-scale developments that typically had 2,000 to 5,000 units in that have transfer fees. 0.5% was a typical one. There was some that charged 0.75%. There were some that charged less, or they tied it to their maintenance fees, a multiple of the maintenance fees. But we also wanted to make sure too that we would not be coming back in the next few years and asking you to increase it. And as you saw, the price tag for some of those ideas for the use of the money, $600,000 to $800,000 raised per year doesn't go real far. We're not going to get a lot of those real quickly. from this source of income. So half of 1% is a fairly low number. And personally, if I'm selling a house, I was gonna say the buyer should pay it. And unless I have a home that has not been kept up and I maybe overpriced it, that's when you're more likely to have to pay it yourself. But with only 100 and some homes being sold a year, and if people want to come here because of the amenities we have and the natural environment we have, it shouldn't be that hard to convince the buyer that they're going to get the best benefit and they should be paying for it. And if you don't sell your house for 10 years from now, if we raise $800,000 a year for 10 years, that's $8 million in improvements. Even if I have to pay part of it myself, I will gain from having a higher value of my home because of those improvements. The people I would be most concerned about are the people that are selling in the next couple of years, where they haven't had a chance for us to build the amenities. But in that case, you can have a bigger argument that the buyer ought to pay it.
All right.
Well, of course, it's all dependent upon market conditions. We've all gone through, most of us have gone through home sales. We know it depends upon market conditions. Who's motivated to sell? Is there a buyer's market or is there a seller's market?
Mm-hmm.
What is the timing for the implementation of this, should it pass? This is the person writing the question, is suggesting a 12-month grace period where people who were planning to sell could get a sale in before the transfer fee is added. These folks might already be planning and didn't have that on their financial planning. So what is the timeline for implementation?
The measure itself does not have an implementation date, as you may notice when you read through the language there. So if the vote is approved, the next step would be the board would be setting a date of implementation. Well, if the vote is approved in August, most likely they can't set a date till September. And the board understands that you need some kind of leeway, and the realtors need some kind of leeway. So what date might be picked, it's going to be by the next board after the elections, but we wouldn't anticipate the beginning date to be October or November, or some other such date. But if a home is already in escrow, we would not expect that home to be subject to the tax.
Okay.
Fee.
So some homeowners feel that they've just finished paying off the shark and then the mandatory fiber optic over the past few years. Have you considered delaying this proposal for a few years to let owners just have a little break from additional fees?
Well, the fees, I can jump in and then you guys can, the fees, the only fee was the shark assessment, and that goes back 12, 13 years ago. The bulk fiber is not a fee that goes to homeowners. What it is the board negotiated on behalf of owners to have internet service paid through TDS, but negotiated on a lower cost per household. So 90% of the households in Sunriver utilize TDS anyway. So that was where the board created this agreement, was with TDS. But the rate for the internet is $35 per month, is about probably about 35 to 40% of what you would pay TDS individually today. So it's really there was not an additional fee. It's just who are you paying? You're paying Sunriver, but at a reduced rate. So the only real big fee was the shark.
Yeah.
And people that chose the monthly payment, they've been paying $30-some a month that they just are be concluding at the end of the year.
Okay. Did you consider a short-term vacation rental fee instead of a transfer fee?
We did consider that as a potential source of additional revenue, but we didn't believe that would raise the amount of money necessary for us to add to amenities. And we've attempted in the past to have fees, based on a broader group.
And can I add to that too? In terms of like short-term rental, it's typically a rental impact fee. And you're looking at that kind of twofold. One, can it help fund new amenities? Because theoretically, you have the bigger houses, you have rentals, a lot more people here, and they're putting more of an impact and maybe driving some of those amenities. But also that fee cannot be substantial because in our nonprofit status, if you're calling it a rental impact fee, we're also collecting some of those fees to cover that additional day-to-day impact that the visitors generate each year. So like emptying trash cans that are overflowing every day on the pathways, cleaning the restrooms. So the fees are really attributed more to accommodating that impact than it is to building new infrastructure and
Usage fee.
yeah.
And let's not forget that 40% of our owners are really small business people that rent their house. So this would throw that fee in the direction of 40% of our owners who bear the burden of that.
In a capital transfer fee situation, eventually all of us are going to sell our houses at some point in time.
Okay, in the current real estate market, the buyers are probably going to expect the seller to pay this fee. This might seem silly because the seller is not going to enjoy the benefit of the dollars raised. Have you explored ways to make it mandatory that the buyer pays this fee instead of the seller?
If we've had in creating the ballot measure and thinking through this, SROA has worked with its legal counsel. And the reason why at the very beginning of this presentation, we talked about it being a negotiation is it's not possible to direct the fee to one party or the other. It is a negotiation. So we lack the legal ability to direct it to the purchaser of the property. So it becomes the negotiation.
Okay, thank you.
We did consider that.
You did consider it and you have a rationale for a different idea. Why create a new and separate fee stream? The implementation and logistics add more bureaucracy and more costs. We have homeowners' dues. Why not simply make that budget work rather than creating more overhead and expense with a separate process? Do we have a good estimate of what the cost will be to implement this fee service?
A very good question. In fact, that question was raised at the last board meeting last Saturday by an owner saying, why create this extra fund for this money to go into and not use the existing ones? The reason being is that's what provides the protection that this will not be used for maintenance or salaries or benefits or normal operating expenses. By having a separate fund, we're assured that that money can only be used for new amenities, infrastructure, and equipment. And we did look at, how does this complicate things? And what our accounting person, Joe Healy, has said, very, very minor. We create a separate line item in our accounts that money goes into. So it adds 2 lines to our financial statement. The auditors say that this is the best way for us to do it, to allow them to audit, to make sure that the promise to the owners that it only be spent for new items, it simplifies their ability to audit and would save us auditing fees versus it going into some kind of a pool. And particularly over time, right now we all remember why it was created, but in 10 and 15 and 20 years from now, having this safeguard that it goes into a separate account, helps us, keep it all straight. And in some way, it's a bookkeeping entry more than anything else. Our accounts are somewhat together. Our management investment firm that manages the reserves and our operating funds and that, it's some minor paperwork. And so there's not a big cost to implement this.
And another component of that question was, I think I heard using the existing maintenance fees. And one of the slides showed that for this budget, or last year's budget, there was $400,000 available out of the existing maintenance fees, all of our fees, on that slide that we had for new amenities. Again, when you look at the cost of some of the desires that we've heard from owners, they go way above $400,000. Though that $400,000 pays for things that you will see this year, such as the shade structures at the pickleball court that are being constructed, some of the shade structures at Shark, which are also responding to demands from owners, questions from owners. So if you want to take a part of the existing maintenance fees and increase that $400,000, say to $800,000, then you're going to be cutting somewhere else. Again, and this is where I go back to our finance committee, I go back to our board, and I go back to the fact that Sunriver SROA is a nonprofit. So as a nonprofit corporation, we're really only trying to collect through maintenance fees the cost to provide the amenity services with a small portion for new amenities. So you're going to have to cut something and to add to that new amenity line item if you want to use the existing maintenance fee.
Right. So this next question plays right into that. Since the fee amount is technically so low, and it will take a while to get enough funds for a big project, is there a special assessment to get things done sooner or increase maintenance fee? Is there something in this proposal that guarantees these other sources of funds, maintenance fees and special things, won't be increased?
Maintenance fees can, as Clark mentioned earlier, been fairly, except for the COVID year, last 10 years, it's been between 3.5, 4. We went to 4.5 this year for a variety of reasons. It cannot go over 6% without a specific vote to the owners.
That's per year.
Yeah, and
Okay.
not no more than 6% is what the board has the authority for.
Okay.
And when we go much higher than what we've been doing, we hear a lot of owners who aren't particularly happy with that.
You know,
Right, because it doesn't matter what size property they have, everybody pays the same.
Right, even if it's a vacant lot, next door to an 8-bedroom home, they pay the same amount, which in my view isn't equitable.
and if you think about, again, the maintenance fees and the average over the past 10 to 15 years, again, absent COVID years, was 3.5 to 4%. That really, it tends to match. Some years it was a little bit more, some years it was less than the cost of living, than your, increasing cost of goods and services that we all experience every year. So increases in electric, gas, all those things. Typically the maintenance fee, the percentage that it increases, is very similar to the cost of living increase. So again, it doesn't build in any fees for improvements of new amenities.
And we do have some room within our current maintenance fees for some improvements that will add to this fund. And we'll take some funds out of here and some funds out of our maintenance dues to build these new amenities. But when you look at those price tags, without an additional source, we're not going to get very far.
Okay. Will homeowners have an opportunity to vote on the ideas that the committee brings forward I'm assuming that would be for the use of the capital transfer fee projects?
I could maybe take this. I've heard a lot from, there's no owner input. I'd like to address that straightforward. We have a history of extensive owner input, something as simple as owner forum at the beginning of any of our meetings. Additionally, we have past comprehensive owner surveys that occur every 3 years, professionally created and completed. We have a triennial comprehensive owner survey coming up, as previously mentioned, in 2027. We have a variety of what I consider to be building blocks, including the strategic plan that was completed last year that had owners participating in that. And 34?
Yeah, it was a task force created of permanent residents, rental property owners, and second home owners, trying to be comprehensive of all owner input.
amongst other opportunities for owners to participate directly in any of these task forces are the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the Pathway Safety Master Plan, Infrastructure and Amenities Task Force, and several others. They're all there at the website for people to look at. Also, all of those were accepted. All of those reports were accepted by the board during the last 5+ years with efforts at implementing pieces of them when possible and within budget. But there was also an opportunity with the board accepting those, all of those building blocks, an opportunity for public review. So I don't know that I've been associated with any organization that has had greater opportunity for owner input in my career in life.
Okay,
So, but related to that, we might add that the biggest input from owners is going to be during the survey that will be happening in early 2027. And then the task force would address it as well. And then they come out with a report. There'd be time for additional comment, but we would not anticipate an item by item vote after the task force. We're a representative government. We get bigger input by having a task force rather than just the board making a decision. But in the end, as all that comes, you've elected the board to make some decisions.
So if I can add one thing to that is through a task force of owners that looks at all of those ideas that were on the screen that says we want pathways, we want an indoor facility, we want new parks. All of those are ideas that the board gets bombarded with from owners. And then it becomes, which do you do? That's the reason you create a task force. That's the reason why you have an equal representation of a variety of owners with variety of interests, so that when they come together and they make a recommendation to the board, it comes with the owner input, but also what that task force, what they are tasked with, is trying to prioritize those based upon their input. So that's where getting to the representative form of government, you can get a list that says and it considers cost, it considers all kinds of things. And it says, here's priority number 1, priority number 2, coming from that input, and that directs the board. So sometimes, on the back end, somebody may have something they would like to see built and constructed that is lower on the priority list, but they need to know that something that might be built first came from this very open, inclusive process.
Yeah. Under what condition does the resort and village get charged a transfer fee? They don't really sell much real estate.
The resort is a little bit different than the village, because the resort, does own a number of condominiums, and they at some point in time, they will sell. Companies sell all the time. And if you look at the ownership of the resort, there's estate planning. As aging owners get to a situation where as they pass away and their heirs inherit the property and the number of owners increases, there's a whole variety of things that happen that it's not surprising that someday the resort would sell and then they would pay the same fee as an owner selling.
But the clear answer to that is if the resort sells property, they are subject to the capital transfer fee, just like if I sell my home, I'm subject to it. However, if I pass it to a family member, I'm not subject to it.
So we spent an extra year almost, because owners may recall, we started talking about this over a year ago. And we spent extra time in writing it and making it part of the consolidated plan and adapting the language in order to help ensure that it would cover commercial property as well as individual homes and properties.
Okay. If the resort lodge sold, would they pay the transfer fee? And when was the last time the resort was sold?
Yes, they would pay. I don't know right off hand the last time they sold. We can throw numbers there. I don't even know what it would sell for. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a huge number. It would, appraisals and the like, but let's say they sold for $50 million. I'm just pulling that out of thin air.
Yeah.
300 million.
100 million.
They pay 50,000.
Or they 500,000. They would pay 1%
Oh, yeah, excuse me.
They would pay $500,000.
There's your treasurer making a math.
But again, it's the same percentage as owners would pay.
Okay, so referring to the past annual home sales. So what are the Sunriver Resort fees of the past year or so? I'm sorry.
Home sales?
Well, let's see, referring to the past annual home sales. What are the Sunriver Resort fees of the past year or so? So I guess is the resort? I'm gonna pass this question down to you guys to ponder while I read the next one.
Are they talking about maintenance fees instead of any other
It
fees?
sounds a little bit more like maintenance
Yeah.
fees because
Yeah, I don't know.
we haven't had,
Oh, the resort pays maintenance fees in two ways. For every condominium they own, they pay the same roughly $2,000 that each of us pays on our homes or condos or a vacant lot. They pay that exact same amount for times the number of condos they own. And then secondly, they pay a fee that the consolidated plan had a formula in the plan that they would pay a fee based on the percentage of their value versus the percentage of the value of all the other homeowners applied to the budget for the year. And the valuation came off of our property tax statement about market value, but that was a number, that's a number that's created by the assessor's office. And what we found was that they were updating that for all us homeowners every year because you kind of get the statistics very easily about home sales and what the values were. So we get updated every year. Commercial property was only getting updated every 6 to 8 years. So what happened is that their percentage was one level 1 year, and for the next 6 to 8 years, their percentage would go down, even though property values were going up. So we kept paying more and they kept paying less. So that was the reason we entered into a negotiated contract, because the consolidated plan says that's the formula for what the resort pays for the resort and their golf courses and other buildings separate from condominiums. That's how their dues is calculated.
Okay.
And they pay about $100,000 under the agreement, and that goes until 2029.
Do you want to address that?
I think that's right on the money.
Okay,
And so we want to be very transparent to people.
yeah, absolutely. So the number of rental homes managed by the resort and or owned by the resort, is this large enough to influence a vote as a block?
The homes
For the home.
managed by the resort does not vote on behalf. If they're managed by the resort, they're owned by individual owners that choose to use the resort's management company for renting their home. And the owner retains their choice to vote whichever way they like. The only votes the resort gets is in the consolidated plan. The resort gets something like 27 votes, and they get another vote for the Sage Springs and another vote there's a couple little votes there where they get about 30 votes, and then plus one for each condominium they own where they pay the same maintenance dues as the rest of us.
Yeah.
Okay. So the important thing is everybody should vote. Vote,
Mhm.
vote, vote. What other resorts in Deschutes County have a transfer fee?
Oh man, this will be going back in my memory banks to when we explored this, when we first started talking about this. I know that Black Butte Ranch has capital transfer fee. I can't remember off the top of my head. I just don't remember. right now.
We're not aware of any others. That's not to say it's not prevalent among homeowners associations. We're the largest homeowner association in Central Oregon and maybe even all of Oregon.
Okay. With who or what are we concerned about being competitive? Sunriver does not appear to have any significant peers in the West. Like, we're already the best.
Well, I just quickly mentioned something I mentioned earlier. Look across the street. It's happening, people. They're coming along. It's really going
We
in.
have competition. And when
And
people are
I've
looking,
spoken to visitors that say, actually say, why would I stay here when I really like the brand new facility across the street, the pool aquatics facility? And actually putting the question to me, have you walked through there to see what they have?
they're doing it.
Mhm.
Okay, we might also point out, when you look at maintenance fees, Caldera pays 3 times the maintenance fees we do. So is this 0.5% gonna stop a buyer from buying in Caldera versus us versus Sunriver? If they have to pay an extra $4,000 every year to be owning in Caldera, this little 0.5% is not gonna stop them from saying, I'm not gonna buy in Sunriver because you have that fee.
Again, I mean, I go back to, I lived in Central Oregon for 35 years and my background is in development and I've seen and worked with in the past, Rosada Ranch, Tethero, Pronghorn, you have Caldera, those are just to name a few in the past 15 years or so, 15 to 20 years, say 20 years, that are new. They have brand new facilities, brand new amenities. And if that is who Sunriver is trying to remain relevant with. Again, you have a lot of money, preaching to the choir of folks that are listening. There's a lot of money that comes from outside Central Oregon. It's coming from the Seattle area, the Bay Area, and all over the US. And folks are looking at if and a lot of the home sales that we're having are cash sales. So they're looking at, I can spend my money here, I can spend my money here. What do I get for my money? That is where you're trying to remain relevant with, if you have an old car, sometimes you want the new shiny car.
So it is about combination of our natural environment and the amenities we offer is what draws our buyers.
All right, so after 2029, will the village and resort maintenance fee increase?
It'll have, well, under the existing, the existing agreement will go away. Those existing agreements will go away. And then it can either be renegotiated or what we will do prior to that is we get like another, 2 years before that expires, we're going to be looking at that formula, factors that go into that, the real market value for the resort properties as determined by the county tax assessor. When they don't update that regularly, that's what resulted in their maintenance fees becoming stagnant or going down in comparison to everybody else. So what we'll do is we'll look at that number, we'll plug it into the formula, and we'll say, is that beneficial for SROA overall? Because does that mean their maintenance fees they're updating it regularly, so now their maintenance fees are going up like everyone else's? Or if they're not updating it, then we sit down at the negotiating table again.
The formula that's written in the consolidated plan becomes the default. When the agreement expires in 2029, that formula, which is the same formula we operated under since the founding of Sunriver, that becomes it goes back to that same formula. And in case, the owners are saying, well, why don't you change that formula? The consolidated plan has language in it that certain provisions cannot be changed without agreement by both parties. We're not allowed, even by a vote of our owners, to change that formula. Our only alternative is to negotiate an agreement that they agree to, as well as us. And that's why we negotiated it 2.5, 3 years ago.
Unless the assessor just completely stops calculating real market value for your home, the resort, all the properties, then we have to move toward appraisals. But we're not at that.
Okay, and then I think you've already addressed this, but just to reiterate it, who votes on maintenance fee increases? Like, did the village and resort have any vote?
They got the same number of votes they will have on this one. The consolidated plan gives a small number of votes. The village has a couple of votes. Is it 2 or 3?
I think it's great.
3. And the resort, as we mentioned, had the 27 for the resort and 1 for Sage Springs and 1 or 2 for something else. And then plus every condominium they own. So they have that same number of votes on the maintenance dues as they do have on this capital transfer fee.
But again, to that point, there's no vote on maintenance fees unless it's proposed to be more than 6%. That is the authority of the board up to 6% every year.
Actually, even actually says or inflation. There's a little caveat in there that if inflation were really high, we could raise it without a vote, a higher amount.
Okay. One of our homeowners says that they pay a maintenance fee for a condo in Hawaii that's based on the size of the condo. Could we do that based on that, like the Deschutes County tax assessment value, or a different way to assess our maintenance fee? Was that looked at in this, writing this plan?
Again, this is a capital transfer fee, so there's a lot of questions about maintenance fees, but I understand, you know, is that an option, changing that in comparison to creating this capital transfer fee? The way that the maintenance fee is calculated for all owners, again, is specified in the consolidated plan. So and what it does is it charges a fee that is the same for each property, meaning and each home, regardless of the size of the home. So if there was a desire to change how the maintenance fees are calculated for individual properties, aside from the formula that specifies commercial and resort properties for each of you, it would require a vote of the consolidated plan. And I'll just speculate, you know, what it could be is, you know, there could be a ballot measure that says, consider changing the consolidated plan that, and completely off the top of my head, homes that are greater than 5,000 square feet pay X%. If you're between 3 and 5, maybe it's lower. And if you're less than 2,000, it's lower yet. That's kind of the equitable, you know, method that smaller home, fewer people, less impact. So less need for maintenance fees in Sunriver.
Okay, just as a reminder, how did it work for the shark? Just, I know that was in the presentation, but it's the questions being asked.
Just like maintenance fees, everyone paid the exact same amount.
Okay,
Right.
but was it voted on by the homeowner?
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yes, and passed overwhelmingly.
Actually, yeah, passed well, way more than 60%.
Okay,
And it did have those 4 ways of paying it off. 3 of which
Required negotiation with future sellers.
Well, no, my point would be, to begin with, that if it was paid over time, not the lump sum in the first year, 2012, I think, it came with an additional 4.5% interest rate. And as I mentioned earlier, you pay with a lump sum in that situation, then and you sell your house, you will have paid for shark for somebody else.
all right. With the new online voting mechanism, it should be easy to align how to spend the capital transfer fees each year. Could it be confirmed that we have the capability of doing pulse type surveys, like just through the voting mechanism?
Well, our surveys are done online. Now they have been past 2 surveys and it will be again. So it's not, and again, people think of surveys as a vote. It's really not a vote. You're giving your preference, you know, rank these in order rather than choose one of the following. And so, you know, through the next survey that we do, you know, there will be questions probably similar to, for example, if we use all those amenities that were on the screen earlier, pathways, indoor wintertime recreation facility, park improvements, and it had all those listed and it said rank in order, we would get a good idea of prioritization that owners want in building those. You know, if you throw cost in there, which we've done in the past as related to these, sometimes that gets shuffled a little bit. But again, that it's not a vote, it's really the survey is the best way.
Well, and I really encourage anybody listening to take a look at the 2024 and the 2021 comprehensive owner survey that are at the website, and you can see how detailed it becomes. And they'll probably change a little bit this year too, with some additional questions or ways of looking at things.
The hard part in the surveys is you need to add a cost item to it. When we asked homeowners several years back whether they'd like to build their own fiber optic system, they all wanted it. They all wanted the control of owning it and not having to deal with a TDS of setting the rates and having control over the quality of service and all that. But when we added the question about how many dollars would you be willing to pay, we asked, would you be willing to pay $1,000 or $1,000 to $3,000 or $5,000? They either said below 1,000 or 1,000 were the heavy answer, when actually it would have cost more than $5,000 per property minimum to build our own system. So the fact that, yes, I want this and yes, I want that, and this is a priority, you got to add a cost figure and say, at what cost?
And that's not to mention just building it, operating it.
Right. So will the board advocate to Deschutes County to reduce the assessed value of our properties by the amount of the transfer fee?
No.
Okay. If the transfer fee is,
We might add, we actually asked the assessor's office, why don't you update the market value of commercial property like the resort every year? And they said, it's unimportant to us in the county. You guys find a different method to do your dues by, because it's not important to us. It's a figure. Even the market value they show us is to make us feel good that our property tax is actually being assessed at this number, although the market value is this number.
okay. The proposal will not generate income to do anything significant for several years. So how do you square that circle? How do you?
Well, even after a year, if we have 600,000 or 700,000 plus some money out of maintenance dues, that will make a difference.
Adding that 400,000.
A portion of that 400, because some of it will go to smaller projects.
But it could be reserved and added to this amount. So, after 2 years, if you had, 650 and 650, and another 200, you could, like in a 2-year period, you could have theoretically $1.5 million, which pays for substantial chunks of those projects.
Okay. New amenities require more maintenance. How will increasing them, how do you pay for the new amenities out of the existing maintenance costs?
Well, that too will be a factor that the board will be end up considering too. As you look at priorities, some facilities require more maintenance than other facilities. A pathway expansion, you do have a little bit more snow plowing, you have to do a little bit more maintenance of the asphalt, but it's not the same as an indoor court facility, to run. So those become factors too. And the board and the finance committee in particular that oversees our finances is well aware that if we add amenities, we're adding to our operating costs. And that's why too, we don't feel you can deplete the reserves we have to add new amenities, because you're going to need some of that to help cover the operating expense and ownership expense of these amenities we add.
But regardless of whether you're building the new amenities through funds generated from the capital transfer fee or through a special assessment for a one item thing or through increased maintenance fees, that's a factor no matter where the funds come from to build those amenities. So that's always a consideration.
Okay. I think you answered this earlier, but I'm going to ask the direct question. How much maintenance fee is paid by the resort? And would this not keep the homeowners fees below at 10%? I'm not sure what that 10% is in reference to, but how much, what does the resort?
10% of the 10% estimate, we would have to raise a similar amount of money. That counts that. I mean, on the condominiums, they'd pay that same 10% increase. And on the other one, it'd be the formula we've talked about or the agreed upon agreement that we come to.
Okay.
These are very good questions, by the way. Thank you all for contributing.
Right? And we're getting through them. So this is great. Since the resort will be a major benefactor of the amenities or resort guests, as the resort has effectively decreased owner value via restricting access to golf, is there a facility for the resort to contribute to this fund once their fee lock has expired? Is there?
Could you give us the first part of that?
Yeah. Since the resort will be a major benefactor of amenities or resort guests, as the resort has decreased owner value by restricting our access to golf, is there a facility for the resort to contribute to this fund for new capital projects once their set fee has expired?
Well, the
Their
first part of
maintenance
that
fee, because we're confusing maintenance fee and capital transfer fee.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But is there a way to get the resort to add to the capital transfer? Well, without a sale, just to add to that fund for capital projects.
Oh, to pay, aside from maintenance fees and aside from the capital transfer fee, if they don't sell, can we ask them to contribute more dollars to build amenities owned by SROA?
Right.
We can't ask. Nothing, it never hurts to ask. But what I would anticipate is, you're right. With the changes to the golf course membership, they took some access away from owners, but they would also tell you that they built their own amenities. They built the Cove. They have Sage Springs. They have their pickleball facilities that they fund themselves without any contribution from SROA. And the argument is, well, those are not available to other owners unless you're staying at the resort, and that's true. But on the back end, if the resort guests want to use the facility, pickleball court, tennis courts, shark, they have to pay a fee. So their guests pay that fee. It's either a gate fee or they would have to somehow, for some of their units, which they won't do, purchase the recreational plus passes. So either way, if their guests are using it, they're going to have to contribute individual dollars.
Okay.
So they are contributing it through their maintenance fees to our shark operation. Because shark isn't funded just by RPPs and MPPs. And as far as the resort, a major benefactor, I think we're all a benefactor of having amenities, of having more things for us to enjoy and use for ourselves and our guests and our family. And like James said, they've paid for their own Cove and pickleball courts.
Okay, so the last questions, there are two, they tie into basically the same thing, and that is the decisions about how the money is spent. If this passes, at what point would we say we need a 60% owner vote on how the money is spent, or does the board make that decision?
Ultimately, it's the board's responsibility and its fiduciary responsibility to represent all owners of Sunriver. Getting to that is a question of how do we get owner input? What processes do we have lined up? The last several years, we've been doing capital projects meetings as well as work plans for the following years. So we're kind of getting things organized over a period of time. I think it's pretty obvious in our statements that there will be a process to look more specifically at capital projects, see what owner input is through the variety of ways that we've laid out, that we've already done, but especially with the upcoming triennial comprehensive owners survey, we'll continue to get that sort of input from them.
It's what the board does, every year. So let's take that smaller amount, say $400,000. They're looking at, here's all the needs for new amenities. Obviously, it's not the big ticket items, but for those smaller ticket items, again, that come from owner input, there's not a vote every year on the ballot that says, do you want shade structures at the pickleball courts? Those are decisions that are made by the board. But again, to Bill's point, this past year before, the board in the fall has a work plan setting meeting and they have a capital improvement. There was a capital improvement meeting where here's everything that's laid out there. Here's potential costs. Here's where these ideas came from. And the board evaluates, and tries to prioritize. Here's what we're going to do. No, it's no different than the way it's done today.
We're hearing from a few voters out there that are saying, we don't trust the board, is what they're basically saying. Yet when we do an owner survey, the board gets 90 percentile favorable ratings that we do a good job overlooking your finances and running Sunriver Owners Association. The finance committee is an incredible group of people that go over those finances, ask the tough questions of staff, and make sure that our reserve accounts have enough there to cover the future operating expenses as we add additional things and amenities to it. They do a remarkable job. And owners will be asked that question in the next survey too.
I want to give an example. When I started working here 6.5 years ago, the way that past projects were brought forward for the board, there was a project, the Infrastructure and Amenities Master Plan, that was being worked on. And there was a task force of owners that looked at a whole variety of infrastructure items, roads, things like that, amenities, which are more of your recreational amenities. They evaluated those from a whole variety of scoring questions, cost being one of those. They created a prioritization of all those and they brought it to the board. So it was owners looking at potential projects and ideas that came from owners, evaluating those, prioritizing them, and giving it to the board. And the board has since, I think most of those are built out and completed over the last 6 years. So again, if you have money specifically for amenities, that process is what Clark and Bill talked, that would start over this fall.
Well, and as a nonprofit, and I mentioned it earlier, we run a really lean budget. We don't have slush funds, a lot of money just to toss around. We're a nonprofit. We're well managed. We just last weekend we had the audit come in showing us once again doing really well. We have the reserve fund review currently underway. The issue is we need revenue because we say we want stuff, we say we need stuff, but we don't have the money to do it just like that.
Contrary, it's a decision of the board, but really what happens is without creating the capital transfer fee or some method of funding for the new amenities that owners are saying they want, nothing will get built. It will be the small incremental things that get done, but the board would have to have that decision and look at the owners and say, we understand we're trying to make the money go as far as possible for what you want, but for some of these large ticket items, can't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to live within our means.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one final question today.
A comment.
Oh, a comment. Okay. 2 people who asked questions. We received lots of questions and we tried to group them together with similar issues. If you feel your question was not asked exactly as you asked, hopefully we were able to address all issues. If you still have questions, please email James Lewis, the SROA General Manager. Okay, as a team for Sunriver U, we field a lot of questions and we try to group them and word them so it can be as efficiently run as possible to get to all the questions.
And we really want to thank the Sunriver U staff and people. They're volunteers, owners just like us. And this would kind of a forum would not be possible without your help and dedication. And thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you
for monitoring and running this.
Okay, and I want to remind everybody that this will be posted online via YouTube. Is it posted as a link on the Sunriver Owners page?
Once Sunriver, you post it to its webpage, we will provide a link to your webpage.
Okay, please,
On that capital transfer fee web portion of the website,
okay.
where everything else is.
So please go back, rewatch it. If you have friends and neighbors asking questions, refer them to this. Give them the chance to become more educated before they vote.
And get out and vote.
And please vote, vote, vote. That's very important.
Just once.
I only can vote once. I mean, our home can only vote once.
Ballots go out July 8th, so, and it will be electronic, so look for the ballot.
Okay.
July 8th through August 8th at noon.
Correct.
And if you don't vote right away on the first email, you will get reminder emails to remind you to vote.
Okay, so thank you very much for taking care of our community and volunteering to do this job. Except you, James, you get paid. Have a great day enjoying all that Sunriver has to offer.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today.